Hello, this is a basic introduction to performing fire simulations in Fry 3D. I'll also go over some of the interface details in this tutorial and go in and set up simple objects in a simple room. When Fry 3D opens, here's the interface. You have the menu bar at the top and you have various toolkits below it. And on the left, you see the compartments window, which lists the various compartments you're going to model. The bottom is properties of any selected item when you see in the top. On the right-hand side, you can see the 3D interface and you can manipulate the 3D camera by Alt, left mouse button, it moves around. Rotates Alt right mouse button zooms, and Alt middle mouse button, which pans the camera. There are various toolkits which are needed for manipulating the 3D space and the objects. The top, this on the left, and the top has got some objects which manipulate the camera and how it's viewed. There are some objects, manipulators here, which also manipulate objects, but they are more for a global manipulation. For more fine-tuned manipulation, you have the toolkits on the left. So let's go back to our compartment window. Here we have the scene is empty, and by default it opens an empty scene. The first thing you want to do is create a new scene or a new database. And you go on File, New, and you can call it anything you want. I'll just go into T and call it first. .fry 3D. The next you want to do is to create a compartment. For this, you select this, right-click on it, and you create a new compartment. It seems like nothing is happening, but actually there is a compartment which is created, which is listed on this dot button here. If you click on it, you'll see a default compartment is being created with fzone_1 as its default name. Select it and it goes to the zone, which is the compartment. Zone and compartment are used interchangeably in Freight. So now you'd want to change the name of a zone or compartment. You click on it, double click on it, and you'll see a dark blue area appearing, and you can type in zone 1 here. Now the next thing you would want to do is to create the space for the compartment. And the way you create the space for the compartment is using boundaries. You specify the extents of your compartment. You select it here and you create a new boundary by saying add a new boundary. When you do that, a default boundary appears over here with a unit size, and you can go ahead and change it. The way you would do it is you manipulate your camera so that you can come in closer, Alt-T, and right mouse button, Alt middle mouse button over here. You can also go ahead and select it here, which already seems to be selected, and you go to View and you say Frame Selection and brings it right into the view. We can go ahead and zoom. Now this is a unit. Fry 3D units are in meters. So you want to, for example, create a compartment of 5 meters by 4 meters by 2 meters long. You can select it here. The icon changes here. Or if that doesn't work, then go to this scale mode here. You can, of course, scale it using these manipulators here. And these are the 3 axes. Here it says Y, Z, and X, but you can ignore it and consider green, red, and blue axis. And you can change these on each of these individual axes. But if you really want to change it all, you can right-click on it. And say in the red, you want to say 4 units, which is 4 meters. Well, I'd say it was the height, which is the green axis, which is 2 meters. And the blue, say 5. And escape. Gets rid of this. And now it goes back to the selection mode here. Before it was in the scale mode. I can go back into the camera, Alt and right click. And then Alt and middle kinda. Puts it into middle. You see these 3 arrows here? You can ignore them for now. Those are basically the positions of the light. And we'll go into the lights and how to position it to visualize it better in a later video. So we got a room right now. Now we need to place some equipment. And the way to do it is go in here. And you right click on it and you say add equipment. By default, it adds an equipment, but it's not in 3D yet. So if it's not in 3D, any CFast simulation and the scenario is going to fail it. And before that, I'd like to briefly touch on what a scenario is. And you can see the scenario in this top tab here. If you click on it, it goes to the scenario. But default, it's called an F scenario 1. That's the scenario which is linked with the zone. So each zone is linked with scenarios, one or several scenarios. In this case, we've just created a default scenario. And by default, anything which is created, any equipment, is not in the scenario. So if it is in the scenario, that means that equipment has failed. So we're taking a conservative approach by saying by taking a conservative approach by saying that anything which is not modeled in 3D is going to fail, which means that by default, it will be a full room burnout, right? We haven't yet simulated yet, but that would be the result of the simulation that this is going to fail even though nothing in 3D has been modeled. So in order for you to position this equipment, you see this kind of wire-looking box here. I click on that area and drag and drop it into the 3D space, and it creates a box. By default, this box is unit size. You can, of course, change it to any dimensions you want, but let's stick it like this for now so that, we can run a simple simulation. Now you need to place a fire source, and for that, you go to your simulation items, right-click on it, and you can click on Add a Source. The same thing you do it. Click on this. You position it somewhere. So you see on this. So it creates an orange box, which is the source of the fire, and you can change the size of this, and that indicates how big the fire is. In CFS, it doesn't really matter. In FTS, it does. So let's go ahead and change the names of these. Say, we'll call it Equipment 1. Same thing. You go in here, double-click on it. Let's call it E1, for example. Not Equipment 1. And then in this case, in this force, click on it, double-click on it, and call it F1. Now we're in a good position. We can hit on save. It saves it. So we have a fire, but we don't have the fire properties of it yet. So first let's go ahead and change its size. It seems a little bit too big. So go in here, go to the scale mode, adjust the scale of it here. Maybe this. Then go into the translate mode, which is over here. There are shortcuts for this as well. And W is translate mode. R is rotate mode. And T is scale mode. But right now we can just do it manually here. Again, you move it here. Make sure it kind of intersected it, assuming that this equipment is going to catch on fire. And that's what we're trying to do. You can also change the display of it. By default, it's a box. But if you go in here, go to the zone item properties, general mesh properties, and change the spatial mesh type from cuboid to CAD mesh, it's going to look like a fire. So you can keep it like this. So we're assuming the fire starts in this compartment. And what kind of fire it is? Go in here and you click on it and the properties appear here. You open your fire definition source and open your fire properties by clicking this 3 arrow, 3 dots here. Let's go with some predefined heat release rates. You're assigned to select it. You close it. And this is a good point to press save. Now we're ready to run a simulation. And this simulation will result in a scenario. We're trying to simulate the source. So what's going to happen is a new scenario will be created with this name of the source, and you can change it whenever you want. And that scenario will contain the results of this simulation. And let's see how that goes. So for that, you click on here and go to this here, the fire icon here, which is Simulate Source. You select on CFast. So it's called F1 CFast. That will be the name of your scenario. Let's say we run it for 100 seconds here. I think we're all good to go. We click on Run. And when we do this, it simulates and the results are displayed. Now we have an immediate failure, which is indicated in the timeline. I didn't go over the timeline yet. The bottom is the timeline, and that simulates for the number of seconds you've run the simulation for. And the arrow here indicates when this equipment fails. In this case, this fire overlaps with this box here, which is the equipment E1. So it fails almost immediately. Now there's no other equipment in the room, so it doesn't really fail anything. You can add another equipment here. Click on Add. And let's call it E2. Double click on it. Say E2. You drag and drop it over here. Maybe adjust the size of it by going into here to the scale mode. Or I go and clicking on it. Here. And you click on Save. Then you resimulate the same scenario again. You click on this, then let's do the same 100 seconds. All the stuff is good. Select on CFast and hit on Run. Now we've simulated, and now you can see nothing has failed more. But we can see the change of colour, and that colour change indicates a temperature change. You can do a few more things. If you go into the scenario mode, you see the scenario. That's the new scenario which have been created. And you can go to the other scenario. So that was a default one which is there. You can leave it over here, and you can see this F1, which is the equipment which is part of this intersection of this fire, which is where it started from, has failed, which means that it's there in the scenario. This hasn't really failed because the temperature of its default failure hasn't reached, and the default is 100 degrees. If you don't specify any failures for it, and you can specify the failure for it under this E2 properties, go into the plant item properties, go into the failure criteria. By default, there's nothing there. Therefore, it's 100 degrees. And we're going to future videos on how to set failures. You can view zone temperatures by going in here. Go to the scenario, click on it, open up the fire scenario, go into visualization, and open up compartment data, and you see the hot gas layer in the CFAS simulation results. So this is a video on setting up a basic FHIR simulation in CFAST. In future videos, we'll go into more important details. Thank you.